So let's look at Lot. The first lesson from Lot's life I want to put forward is this lesson, is that ingratitude breeds unfaithfulness. The first problem that we have with Lot is that he has strife with Abram. But that word strife is very, very important. Read this picking up in verse 5. Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents. Now, where did Lot get his flocks and herds and tents, do you think? Also from Pharaoh, or maybe from Abram himself. It's a little bit unclear in the text, but at the very least, Lot has benefited from Pharaoh's favorable treatment of Abram, despite Abram's sin. Lot has benefited from that. Or Abram actually shared in what was given to him with Lot. But either way, Lot is a recipient of blessing through Abram. Are you tracking? Okay. And so he had all of this stuff, verse 6, so that the land could not support both of them dwelling together. For their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together, and there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. At that time, the Canaanites and Perizzites were dwelling in the land. Now, you might think, okay, so it's just conflict on this lower level between sort of Lot's employees and Abram's employees, and that's not necessarily reflective of them. Well, then note what Abram says, verse 8. Abram said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between you and me, and between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, for we are kinsmen." So there's not enough land to support all their wealth, and then because of that, there's strife. Now, I said that word is very important. There's a word used here in chapter 13, maribah, in Hebrew. It is used twice in the Hebrew Bible. Twice. One time here, and the other time in Numbers chapter 27. Now, what's going on in Numbers is that the people of Israel have left Egypt, and they are traveling throughout the wilderness because they reject God ultimately, but they're traveling on the way to the promised land. And on the way to the promised land, they have a series of trials. And at each of them, they grumble against God. They are ungrateful to God. He has rescued them out of the house of slavery, but then they go into the desert, and the first thing they start doing is they start complaining. We don't have water. We don't have bread. We don't have meat. We don't have... And they conclude, their ingratitude causes them to conclude that Yahweh God has brought us out of the house of slavery for no other purpose than to kill us in the desert. And that culminates with, at the 10th of these tests, it culminates with them getting ready to kill Moses so that they can go back to Egypt. So you have a people whose ingratitude to God causes them to pine for what they had back in Egypt. Hold that in your mind. In Numbers 27, Moses, who at the very last of those times is afraid of the people, and so he doesn't properly honor God, and he reacts in exasperation and frustration, and there's a whole story there. But then what God says to him, Numbers 27, verse 12, the Lord said to Moses, "Go up into this mountain of Abarim and see the land that I have given to the people of Israel." But then he tells Moses, you don't get to go into the land. When you have seen it, you also shall be gathered to your people as your brother Aaron was. Why? Because you rebelled against my word in the wilderness of Zin, where the congregation quarreled. And that's the second time that this word, meribah, is used in the Hebrew Bible. 2 times. One time in Genesis 13, verse 8, let there be no strife, let there be no meribah between us, Lot. And then the other time in Numbers 27. Now, who is the quarrel with in the book of Numbers? Well, you might say, well, the people of Israel, they're quarreling with Moses. They don't like him. And in a kind of direct sense, that's true. They want to kill Moses and go back to Egypt. But really, what God says about them is that they're quarreling with him. And they're quarreling with him because they are ungrateful. They don't have what they want from God, and they perceive his character to be something other than it is, and they perceive his goodness to be non-existent, and they're all about what they want when they want it. And I think that Lot is prefiguring that very reality. Lot has a great deal of wealth and and blessing, either directly or indirectly, on account of Abram, but he is nonetheless discontent. And I think that that's indicated by the fact that you have this word used 2 times in all the Bible, a clear connection. And so Lot, I might say it like this, Lot has ridden Abram's coattails, and now he has strife with Abram, saying, I don't have enough. Lot does not appreciate what he's been given. And this discontent is going to make him ripe for increasing disloyalty to God. Now,